Hello and welcome to the Vlogging Pod. Tonight we are joined by best-selling author Alice Ivinya. Welcome, Alice.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. So, let's start right off by talking about a German fairy tale that inspired your series, Kingdom of the Birds. Tell me about this fairy tale.
Yeah, so it's based on the fairy tale The Goose Girl, which is a lesser known Grimm fairy tale. And it's one of my favourites. It's a childhood favourite. It's a nice mixture of being sweet but quite dark at the same time. But I love a lot of the Grimm brothers fairy tales.
Okay, awesome. I don't think I've ever heard of this fairy tale. Can you give us a little bit of the storyline?
Yeah, of course. So the storyline is that in a faraway kingdom, there is a good princess who has a horrible maid in waiting, and she is told that she has to go to a faraway country and marry the prince there to stop a war, and they have to travel far to get there. And it's just her maid, and some guards. And halfway across, her maid um, basically throws the princess off her horse, steals her belongings, and says, "I'm going to be the princess, and you can be my maid, or either that, or I'm going to kill you," depending on which version you're reading.
Oh, wow.
Um, and and the princess escapes, and then the maid goes on to the faraway country as the princess, and is greeted as the princess. Um, and starts courting the prince there and getting ready for the wedding. Meanwhile, the real princess gets her way there in secret and becomes a goose girl, so just a poor person who looks after geese. Um, and meanwhile, she meets a mysterious man in the fields where she takes the geese, and they talk and they fall in love. And then, of course, it turns out to be the prince in disguise. And then they manage to find out that she's a real princess, and the maid gets a horrible death, and everyone lives a happy ever after.
Oh, wow. I don't.
That's a very quick summary of it all. Oh, and she has a talking horse. I can't miss out Falada. She has a talking horse throughout it. Who gets killed by the horrible maid.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, that's
I
the
am.
darkest bit.
I am actually going to have to look this up.
Oh, it's great. It's an absolutely great fairy tale. And there's some really, really nice retellings of it as well.
Nice.
Different authors have done different versions of it. My favourite one's by Shannon Hale.
Nice. Since we are talking right off about your series, or you're based on a series of Kingdom of the Birds, so why don't we talk a little bit about that? Tell us about the second in the series, Feathers of the Blood.
Yeah, so the first one, which is Feathers of Snow, is a very similar retelling to the actual fairy tale at its core, apart from the roles of the maid and the princess are switched. So I have a bad princess and a good maid, and it follows the maid. Um, and that's quite similar to that story, but in a much more dramatic setting. And then the second book is, so the main character is called Brianna, um, and so because she's the maid, it's hard to say the story without giving too many spoilers.
Would you like me to read the synopsis off your website? Would that help?
No, what can do? I think it's even the synopsis has a bit of gives away something that happened in the first bit. But I suppose if you know the original fairy tale, you can guess what's going to happen. But because she's found out to not be the real princess, she's cast out, and exiled rather than killed in the book, in my story. And she has to basically find her own way in the wilderness, in the snowy wilderness, which is the world they live in, which has giant talking beasts and lots of magical things going on. And she basically has to learn to stand up for herself, having been basically abused by the princess that she serves her whole life. and it's basically about her finding her own strength.
Okay. So, what made you decide to take on your own take of the German fairy tale inspired?
Yeah, I think it's because it's one of my favourite fairy tales. Just one day, I just got hit by an idea for it, which was just thinking, gosh, imagine if you were in an arranged marriage where you weren't the person you think you are, who everyone thinks you are, and how scary that would be. Because not only is an arranged marriage scary, it's scary because you don't want them to find out who you really are. And then because I love the Goose Girl, I just wrapped it all together um, and had great fun.
Do you think you might have taken a gentle edge to it since you decided not to kill off the maid?
um, I don't know. I think it's gentle in the sense that it's meant for young adults. So
Okay.
it's a book whose main aim is sort of for 16, 17-year-olds, but it definitely has a very dark edge to it. So
Okay.
there's a massive sense of foreboding. And unfortunately, I do keep the fact that her talking horse is killed, which instantly makes it a lot darker and slightly traumatizing.
Right.
um, it had to happen. It had to happen to stay true to the original.
Right. So with your books, let's take a moment to mention character drafting. I read something I found interesting. Um, you said you like to reenact your characters' emotions, like your facial expressions, so that you have a baseline to what to write. Tell me about that.
Um, I think a lot of the time when I'm writing, especially the main character, I do get very much immersed in. I think because I write in what I call, or what a lot of people call deep first person. So it is very much talking about their emotions, and it's designed so that you feel like you're there and that you are the person. Um, and so a lot of the time, I sort of feel like I become the character that I'm writing, and will sort of enact a conversation so I can get the body language and the facial expressions and everything else, which must look very, very strange to anyone watching.
Now, when you talk about anyone watching, do you write in like coffee shops, out and about, or do you just basically write at home?
No, I mostly write at home. So I mostly write when my son is in bed because I've got a 3-year-old.
Okay,
So my normal writing time is just after he's gone to bed and when
gotcha.
things are a bit more tidied up. I do them. But I have occasionally, yeah, occasionally done in coffee shops. But then I try very hard not to put any faces
Okay.
because
So basically, it's anybody walking by a window. I got you. I got you. Okay.
or my poor husband.
Right. I got you. I got you. So we mentioned your characters. Now let's touch a little bit on your world drafting. I've read that they are inspired about how they feel to you. So tell me exactly how that works. I mean, I understand how the world feels to you, but how does that actually develop into an actual world drafting of where you're writing your books?
Yeah, I find it quite hard to explain, but I think when I'm writing a scene or a location, I first of all think about how I want it to feel, and then I will shape everything around that. So, for example, with the world of Kingdom and Birds and Beasts, so in Feathers of Snow, I wanted the country that she was going to and the man that she was being forced to marry to seem very unwelcoming. And I wanted the feel of it to be barren and strange, and unwelcoming, but also with a beauty that's undeniable, but quite harsh.
Mm-hmm.
And so I made it snowy and unpopulated and full of pine trees and not much else, flora. And I made, but also very beautiful with sort of hills and mountains and lakes.
Okay.
Um, and so I sort of like did everything from the feel that I wanted to really capture her emotion of having to go to marry someone that she was completely unfamiliar with in a strange land.
Okay. So probably the world settings starts off very dark. But as your characters meet and perhaps become more involved, the world opens up to become a more beautiful landscape. Is that what I'm understanding?
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. So at the start, their relationship is very cold and very just unwanted, and so the whole world feels like that.
Okay.
And then as they get closer, and to be honest, it's not just their relationship; it's as she finds herself and becomes more comfortable with herself, she discovers more and more the beauty and her place in the beauty around her and the way that she can interact with the world. Um, and so that it becomes something that's really, really precious to her.
Okay. So I hear you have something new coming out soon. I believe. Now, quote me if I get this wrong. The Widow and the Beast.
Yeah, I've got The Widow and the Beast. So the next thing that's coming out is the third book in Kingdom of Birds and Beasts. So Kingdom of Feathers, which is the one after Feathers of Blood, comes out on the 22nd of August.
Okay.
Just putting the very final touches of that one at the moment before it goes off to my copy editor.
Can,
And then The Widow and the Beast is my poor neglected child that I wrote most of it about 2 years ago. And then it's kept on being put on the back burner. And I keep on thinking I really, really need to finish it. So that will hopefully be coming out in a few months' time when it finally gets my attention again.
can you possibly tell us a little bit about that series?
Yeah, so that one is about, so again, it is a fairy tale retelling, but it's a almost unknown fairy tale, which is because we go to Scotland quite a lot as a family. I live in England,
Okay.
and when we go to Scotland, we love to go to the Highlands, and the Highlands have just amazing myths and legends there. And there's one legend of a Kelpie, which is so Kelpies are most frequently displayed as sort of water horses that can be quite dangerous and vicious and often displayed as being evil. And in a lot of the ancient legends about them, they can shapeshift into women or men that are very attractive and tend to lure the opposite sex to drown them and eat them in the water. Um, and there are and I love Kelpie myths. And when you're in the Highlands, it feels just like they're real because their lochs are so atmospheric with the mist and the mountains, and how still the waters are. And also when you drive up the motorway, there's actually two massive statues of kelpies, which are giant horse heads rearing from the floor, which are probably the size of six-story houses. They're absolutely huge. So it does feel like such a magical place. And there's one legend called a kelpie that lives in the River Bara, which is that a kelpie basically attacked a woman or tried to seduce a woman as a man, and she managed to hook a magical bridle around it, and that tamed it so it became a horse. And then she took it back to her farm, and it ploughed her fields and basically helped her rebuild her farm. And then over the years that happened, they fell in love, and then she removed the bridle, and he decided to stay in human form with her, and they got married and lived happily ever after.
Wow.
Um, and I just love that story. It's really not very well known. But I love that story. I love the idea of like one small girl being able to tame like a ruthless monster um, like that, and it just really reminds me of Beauty and the Beast.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how you've got one the man the man trapped in a monstrous form who hates everything and is a danger to people, and then he's changed by love and changes back into a man. Um, and so the story that I've written with The Widow and the Beast is basically a retelling of that, but I've made it much more into a fae kingdom where there's lots of different types of fae, and it's all a bit weird. It's very Celtic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and it's great fun to write. It's a little bit weirder than some of the other things I've written. It's a bit more illogical with the craziness of the fae and everything.
Well, I'm actually enchanted with the series name, Kingdoms of the Fairy Path. Tell me how that came about exactly. I mean, it seems it's very enchanting, the title for the series.
Yeah, so the idea is that I'm going to have four kingdoms, which have different fae in them. So, and sort of based on the elements. So the Kelpie's from the water kingdom, and then there's a fire kingdom and a wood kingdom and an ice kingdom. And each of the books is going to be one of the characters, um, basically. So the idea is there's a curse over the whole of fairyland, and these four women each break the curse in these four separate kingdoms. And so that's sort of where and the fairy path is based on Celtic legends, where if you go wandering into the woods and you wander accidentally into fairyland, you can follow a path where um, the woods can change and you can get lost and basically wander forever. So it's sort of based on that.
You seem to really like the fairy tale aspect, right? Am I
Yeah,
getting that
absolutely.
right? And your book covers are very enchanting. Tell me a little bit about how those come about. Do you do them yourselves? Do you hire them out? Tell me how that comes out.
Yeah, so I've got a few different cover artists. The person who did my covers for the Kingdom of Birds and Beasts series, so Feathers of Snow, Feathers of Blood, and Kingdom of Feathers, she is actually an author herself, and she designed her covers for her own series, and then decided that they didn't portray her genre quite right, and so she put them up for sale. And the moment I saw them, I just fell in love with them. So I just need those covers. Um, so I bought those actually before I'd even written the first word of the series, but they are so perfect. And then my first two fantasy books, The Flawed Princess and Queen Avon, they were done by the same designer, as each other, and they were ones where I basically just told her a concept and she did them for me.
Right.
But unfortunately, she stopped working. And then I've got various ones which are basically pre-made covers where I have a horrible book cover addiction where I'll just look at book covers for hours every day, and occasionally I get in and buy one, and sometimes I actually have to write the book for the cover rather than the other way around because I've just fallen in love with something that looks so pretty.
Well, I'm
But I've had many. I haven't written books for yet.
I'm looking at them on your site currently. So I'm looking at currently Slipper in the Snow.
Yeah,
And then you have the Nettle Snow, the Secrets in the Snow, and the Princess in the Snow. So very enchanting covers, very enchanting. Um, so tell me, since we're talking about covers, let's talk about how your covers with your fans. Tell me about your connection with your fans and how you're able to do that with your fans, be able to have a connection.
yeah. I mostly connect with my fans through Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've met just the most wonderful people through Facebook, and they just are so encouraging. And some of them have basically become friends, which is just so lovely from all around the world. And there's been some of my super keen readers and fans have really helped me actually with some of my later books, because a lot of them are really good at reading a book in 24 hours. So I'll often send them an early copy just to say, can you just tell me that it's okay before I send it out to the world? And they can make very helpful suggestions. The other main way I interact is through my newsletters. So I send out a newsletter once a fortnight, and I quite commonly get emails back. Um, Often because I work as a small animal vet. I say the biggest communication I have with my fans is people sharing pictures of their pets, which is actually really lovely, even if it's got nothing to do with books.
Well, that's very interesting. So you're married, you're a mother, you're a vet, and you're a writer. So that's quite a bit.
Yeah,
That is quite a bit.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know how I managed to fit it all in. I only work 3 days as a vet, so I'm not a full time vet.
Right.
Um, and I do, yeah, and then I look after my son as my main job rest time, and then I write pretty much every evening.
Well, I think that's awesome. Still, the education you have to do to even take care of an animals in general as a vet, that's quite an accomplishment right there. And let's not forget to shy away from how much it takes to be a mother in general or a parent in general. So that is a full time job.
I think that, yeah, being a mum, I think is more work.
Oh yes, oh yes.
Especially emotionally. So.
Yes, exactly. So for my final question for you this evening, um, what would you have your readers take away from you and the way that you write?
I think the thing that I am most happy about when someone comments on my book is um, saying that it gave them hope to overcome something difficult in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only happened a few times, but it's at the times when I feel like giving up, or maybe thinking, oh, this is just too much work or something like that. Where I look at those comments or those reviews or those emails and I think, no, actually, this is really worth it, because it can stories have such a power to change people and to give people hope and strength. And I think because most of my main characters have overcome quite extreme situations, and quite a few of them have perceived disabilities. For example, I've got Violet in The Four Princesses has a Club Foot. I have Adelaide, who is deaf in Silent Melody, and Brianna in Feathers of Snow has PTSD and quite extreme anxiety, and has just and claustrophobia and all sorts from her history of abuse, basically, from the princess. Um, and it's just wonderful when you show that actually these characters have put up with so much, yet they are still strong and they can still do good and they can still be kind and help other people, um, and um, and overcome everything that they're challenged with. And I just really hope that that is the message that people get across with, that actually it doesn't, whatever has happened to you, um, almost like let it become a part of you, and still don't let go of that hope that you can make a difference in other people's lives.
Right. Well, I want to thank you so much for being on the program tonight.
Thank you so
And
much for having me.
well, it was a pleasure. It really was. I want to thank you so much for being on, and I want to also thank our guests. I'm sorry, our listeners. My apologies. I get a little tongue tied sometimes. Um, Thank you, everyone, for coming in every evening. It is a wonderful and a delight to always see you in the room with us. Please stay tuned to this coming Thursday when we have our next guest. Thank you again, everyone. Have a great evening. Bye bye for now.